Today we're making this delicious and tender vanilla bean cake. We start by making the cake batter, and I like to use a scale for this, but you can totally use cup measures as well. We're using 3 cups or about 375 grams of all-purpose flour, 600 grams or about 3 cups of granulated sugar, 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and then 1 teaspoon of salt. We give that a quick mix on low just to incorporate everything together. You can also do this with a hand mixer or a whisk. Once our dry ingredients are combined, we're adding in 2 sticks or 1 cup of unsalted butter that's at room temperature, and we're going to mix this on a low speed until the mixture looks kind of like moist sand. You can increase the speed to medium once the butter starts to get incorporated, and this is how it should look. Then we add in 1 cup of room temperature egg whites. I like to use the pasteurized egg whites that come in a carton just so I don't have to deal with the yolks, but you can also use 7 fresh large egg whites. The batter should start to look really thick at this point. I like to scrape around the sides of the bowl and the bottom because a lot of times I find the dry ingredients kind of collect down there and get stuck. Then we add in 1.5 cups of room temperature sour cream, 2 tablespoons of oil like vegetable or canola oil, anything that really doesn't have a flavor to it, and then our most important ingredient is a high quality vanilla bean paste. I like to add kind of a rounded tablespoon here to be very generous with my vanilla bean paste because it's really what's going to give this cake so much amazing flavor. Then we mix our batter on a low speed at first just to make sure that none of those wet ingredients kind of explode out of our bowl. And then we're going to increase the speed to a medium speed and mix for about 15 to 30 seconds until the batter is combined and looks really nice and smooth, just like this. We're going to scrape around the sides of the bowl one more time just to make sure that everything is really beautifully combined and smooth, and then give this one more mix on a medium speed for about 30 seconds. This helps lighten the texture of the cake batter and help it bake up really nice and tender. This might sound counterintuitive to what you know about baking, but this recipe uses the reverse crumbing method, so you don't have to worry about overmixing the batter. Next, we divide our cake batter between our 3 prepared 8-inch cake pans. I've lined these with parchment rounds and then sprayed the sides with baking spray. I like to use a scale just to make sure that each pan has the same amount of batter in it so they bake up to the same height. And these are baking in a preheated 350-degree oven for about 33 to 35 minutes. I like to rotate them halfway through just to make sure that everything bakes up nice and even. While the cake layers bake, we work on our vanilla bean buttercream. So we start by adding 4 sticks or 2 cups of unsalted butter into the bowl of our mixer. I like to make this recipe in a stand mixer just because I think it's easier and it gets a little bit messy with all the powdered sugar, but you could also use a hand mixer. Once the butter looks nice and smooth, we add in 1/2 teaspoon of fine salt and then 2 tablespoons of vanilla bean paste. I know this seems like a lot, but vanilla is like the only flavor in this cake and you really want it to be nice and prominent. This is also going to give our buttercream such a beautiful look with all those pretty speckles of our vanilla bean. Next, we're slowly adding in 2 pounds of powdered sugar or about 7 cups, and I like to just use a 2-pound bag so I don't have to measure. I add this in while mixing slowly, and about halfway through I add in my heavy cream just to help make the frosting easier to mix. And then I add in the rest of our powdered sugar. If you want to avoid any powdered sugar clouds or explosions, you can always place a kitchen towel over your mixer to help prevent that. We scrape the sides of the bowl one more time, and then we do a quick little consistency check to make sure our buttercream looks good. You can see that little curl on the end of my spatula. It means that we are all ready to go. I like to give it a quick stir by hand with a rubber spatula to push out any air bubbles that might have been incorporated in the process, and then we set that aside. Our cake layers are now baked, and I like to run an offset spatula around the edge of the pan to help release the cake layers easily. Then I'm using a serrated knife to trim the caramelization off the sides of the cake layers and to level the top. These cake layers bake up pretty flat, so that step is optional, but it does make the cake a lot easier to stack and frost. So I've added some buttercream to our board to help stick that first cake layer in place, and now I'm spreading a thick, even layer of our vanilla bean buttercream on top of each cake layer. A great tip if you're having trouble frosting your cake layers is to chill them in the freezer for about 20 minutes so that they're not fully frozen, but they're cold to the touch. That can really help reduce crumbing and make it a lot easier to frost your cake. Now that our cake layers are stacked, we're covering the cake in a thin coat of frosting, which is called a crumb coat. It's just going to lock all those crumbs into place and make it really easy to get a perfect second coat. I like to clean up the top edges with a small offset spatula, and then I'm popping our cake into the freezer for about 5 minutes until that frosting is firm to the touch. Then we add on our second thicker layer of frosting, and I'm using a large offset spatula to spread at the top of the cake and then slowly work my way down. Once we've covered the cake, I like to use a bench scraper just to get the frosting nice and smooth. And if you're struggling to get your frosting smooth, I actually have a whole tutorial up on that. I'll link it above. I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to decorate this cake because I really wanted the vanilla bean speckles to be prominent, and I wanted to decorate in a way that didn't take away from that. So I decided just to add some pretty simple rainbow chip sprinkles around the base and some pretty buttercream dollops on top. I added a few more sprinkles to the top, and then it was time to cut in and enjoy this cake. I had been looking forward to this all day. Ever since I added in all that vanilla bean paste, I just knew this was going to be so good, and let me tell you, it lived up to my expectations.